write a home about. Today's March. March. What are we? March 18th? Yeah, March 18th.
Oh my God, it's his
And
birthday.
it's Yud Aleph Other base.
Yeah, that's Ashram Menachem Moshe's birthday today.
Is that-
13, bar mitzvah.
It's exactly 6 months and 6 months and I guess 14 years after Reb Usher passed away.
How much?
It's exactly 6 months. He passed away Motzei
Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur, which was Yud Aleph of Tishrei.
Uh-huh.
So it's exactly half a year. And I think it was 14 years ago.
14 years ago?
Thought about it this morning. I don't know why. Okay.
I thought he was your brother's. No.
Yeah.
So,
He's been gone that
so there's
long.
been a request to do a short review. So, a very short review would say that we've learned a little bit about Emunah and Bitachon. And we learned that Emunah is to purge, to be able to clean the mind from all the different thoughts, non-constructive thoughts, and all the problems that we have in our head, and to set the stage for something new to appear. And we said that we learned this from how the Arizal describes the creation of the world. That in order to create the world, Hashem first of all created an empty space, and then into that empty space He introduced a ray of infinite light. And so Emunah is the creation of the empty space, and it cleans out everything in our mind and in our emotions. And Bitachon is the creation of a new world within that empty space. And by a
Can you
new
say that
world,
again, please? It was too fast. Bitachon is.
and Bitachon is the creation of a new world within that space. And that new world is emotions and thoughts. And the main thing is that we can't do it like the way Hashem did it. It's not something from nothing entirely, because we remain the ones doing this, and we remain ourselves during the process. But it's very essential in order to navigate life. You have to be able to do these purgings from time to time. And we began to see last week that it should be at least once a day. At least once a day, before daybreak. So that daybreak itself becomes the entrance of the infinite light into the vacuum, into this empty space that we've created. But that's one of the most powerful meditations that a person can do in order to continue to pursue his life, to continue to do good things and not get stuck, not get hung up in what we described last time as all the foul odor or all the boiling waters that are full of imaginary wants, imaginary needs, and all kinds of plans that I don't really need. And it's very interesting that I just saw a quote from Warren Buffett this morning. He writes, "The most successful people in the world mostly say no."
Say no.
Yeah.
They know how to say no.
They know how to say no. So,
My parents were not successful, and they said no. Ooh.
Ken, I don't think it's if and only if.
It depends what you call success.
Ken, what he meant is that people
Yes,
get,
they created it perfect.
they have too many plans, they have too many things, and they don't have a tzimtzum. They never go through a tzimtzum, through some kind of contraction to be able to focus themselves. And that's one of the big things that happens, is after you purge everything out and you bring the ray of light is exactly like that. It's very focused. It's very one-dimensional almost. And then it expands and it creates worlds. But in principle, it's very focused in the beginning. And so that focus is so necessary in order to continue to achieve something. So in a certain sense, that saying no that he was talking about is like sort of not trying to build something, just trying to retract, and because there's so many options, so many things you can do, so many things that are possible. So how do you know which one is the right one? So most of what's offered to you or you think is related to you is revealed to be not related at all. That's the greatness of the purging, of the emunah. And the bitachon is then to be able to bring down what needs to be brought down in order to succeed in something. And there, usually, we'll see,
Wait, it's emotions, it's bringing down.
it's also emotions.
But it's also good.
It's everything. It's a whole new me, if you want. Whether it be in the actions that I do, or how I conduct myself, or how I feel, and so on. We all know that it's very, very important to be able to figure out a way how to get rid of the need rather than try to fulfill it with candy.
Say that again. Get rid of the need rather than
Can,
stuff your face.
rather than stuff yourself, meaning trying to fill. Because when you feel this overwhelming feeling of I'm just not good enough, I haven't done enough, you feel this angst inside, you're unfulfilled. So what do a lot of people do? They go to the fridge and they start eating. Why? Because the feeling is one of need. Okay?
Emptiness.
It's not just emptiness. If it was just emptiness is not a bad thing. But I have unfulfilled needs. That's how we describe the boiling waters. And the boiling waters are like that. I have this crazy taiva. I have this incredible craving to succeed, to be, to do, to this, to that. I don't even know what it is. But it's left unchecked inside of me. And so I have to find some way to fill it up. And the easiest thing is just to go to the fridge and fill it up physically. And that works. It's incredible that it does.
Did you say last time how the Mayans, Sidonos is connected with Mesa, doing something
Right.
Mesa? What was
Meaning that it has to do with will. Mezid says that somebody did something on purpose. And Maim Zaidonim means that they come from the will, from all the different imaginary needs that the will has. They're ratzim, they're running all the time. The nefesh is constantly in a state of ratzot. Doesn't know how to do shov. Shov is emunah. To go back, to return back to your source, that's emunah.
And is Mesa, can be used in a positive way to do something to Mesa?
The meza just means that it was done on, it's a willing act. It's a voluntary act. It wasn't done involuntarily. That's all. It could be something positive, it could be something negative. When a person gives tzedakah, you can give it involuntarily, and then it's like,
Are you saying that
you wouldn't say he did it by mistake, but you would say that he didn't really want to do it.
if shov is amuna,
Mhm. But
what's
so is bitachon.
bitachon?
So the ratzah that's stuck in me is not the ratzah of
What's that
bitachon.
Hebrew word you're using?
Ratzah is to run, and shov
Oh,
is to
right,
return.
Run or return.
So the ratzah that's overtaken me is imaginary. It's not real. It doesn't come from a good place. It's coming from leftovers, residue from all the different things that I wanted to do and I imagined that I would do and this and that. Basically, it's an ego product. And so I feel empty in the sense of I feel unfulfilled. And I have to fulfill myself in some way. So what I go and I look for is something that will fill me up. So there's a lot of stuff that will fill me up physically. But it doesn't provide real achievement. It's not a real achievement. Although in the past it would have been an achievement to be able to eat 3,000 calories in one sitting. But very few people knew how to do that or could afford to do that. Today it's not an achievement anymore. So what's required is not to fill that need. It's actually to purge it, to get rid of it. And we call emunah the ability to get rid of all these imaginary needs.
Did you go over a mechanism to do that?
And so the emptying of the mind, emptying of everything, purging, putting everything aside, not worrying, you could call it, that's the mechanism. This is the most
But how do
important
you do
mechanism.
that? Yeah,
For
what's the
instance,
mechanism of the mechanism?
So
Just
y-
meditating.
You're looking
just-
for something more physical. So something more physical, it just happened to be by Shgacha. Last night I was learning this with somebody. Reb Nachman, the first Torah that he taught Reb Nassan was the Torah about Mechiyat Kaf, about clapping. And what he explains exactly the same thing. He says, when you clap, what do? You create an empty space. Why? Because you're pushing the air away. So, again, it's not that you're going to dive into the empty space that he created. It's a symbol, and you create this way. And he says, when Hashem created the world, he did the same thing. How do I know he did the same thing? Because there's 28 letters in the first verse of the Torah, Bereshit bara
Thank you.
Elokim Tashamayim v'Taaretz. So 28 divides into 14 and 14, even divides that way inside the pasuk, based on the Etnachta. There's 14 letters. Bereshit bara Elokim. Then there's an Etnachta. Those are 14 letters, 6 and 3 and 5, which is 14 together. And then Et Hashamayim v'Taaretz is another 14. And there's another pasuk in the prophet that says that with the right hand he created the heavens, and with the left hand he created the earth. So he says, we put all this together, mamish together, you get a clap. And so when you clap your hands, he says you're cleaning the air. Why is that related to anything? This is something I wanted to talk about anyway. Whenever we think symbolically of clean air, meaning air that's been purged, that it's no longer full with our imagination, with our imaginary needs and all these things, it's called the air of Eretz Yisrael. Why? How do we get this? Because it says that the Avira de Eretz Yisrael machkim, that the air of the land of Israel wisens a person. We know that wisdom is bittul. Emunah in this sense is like bittul, it's like cleaning everything out. It's to feel that there's nothing here. I'm free of all the needs that I have. I'm free of all the imaginary errands and itchayvuyot, the obligations, and all the things I committed to, and this and that. You have to know how to
Say no.
get rid of it. So if you just say no and then you leave it at that, so that's not it yet. But at least it's the first point. I thought that was interesting that he said that. But I mean, Warren Buffett, it's not exactly Torah, but it's still, it has some kind of merit to it. So says Reb Nachman, when you do this, you're cleaning it out from all the foreign thoughts. All the foreign thoughts, what is that? That's the process of turning Eretz Canaan into Eretz Yisrael. It's taking your emotions, Eretz Canaan. How many Canaanite nations were there? There were 7, and they correspond one to one to the emotional faculties. Okay. Canaan himself is Chesed, and all the way down to the Yevusi is Yesod, and the Girgashi was the Girgashi is Hod. And who's Malchus? Malchus is I don't remember right now. Anyway, it's described in a lot of books of Chassidus, how to do the correspondence. So when you're purging, it's like you're getting rid of these Canaanite nations that inhabit your land. And you purge the land, you clean it out. That's why you can't leave anything alive there. When you say lo techayeh kol neshama, it's also it's equal to lo techayeh kol machshefa, the famous in Gematria. That not to leave a soul alive is like not to leave a witch alive. What's the connection?
What are the 2 words again? Machshefa
Machshefa is a witch, and lo techayeh kol neshama, any soul, and it's equal to machshefa. Kol neshama equals machshefa.
Yeah, but if Canaan was Hesed, that's not bad.
Again, but it's a chesed lumim chatat. It's a negative form
Negative.
of chesed. It's all negative emotions that you're full of, that we're all full of. So to conquer the land of Israel, to turn the land of Canaan into the land of Israel is to conquer the space. So says Reb Nachman something beautiful. He says, how does Rashi explain the first pasuk? He says that the whole reason Hashem gave us the first pasuk, who cares how He created the world? How does that help us? It doesn't help us. We don't create worlds. So he said, no, because said Rav Yitzchak, Rashi says, said Rav Yitzchak, why did you tell us about this? The first pasuk, to tell us how to create it, in order to teach us what to tell, what to say to the non-Jews. What are we supposed to say to them? That all the land belongs to Hashem. That's emunah. There's only Hashem. Birtzoto netana lahem. So He allowed you to dwell here for the time that you've been here. Birtzoto netala mehem unetana lanu. And when He wants to, He takes it away from them and He gives them to us. That taking it away from them is purging the land. That's in the mind. That's entering the space of Eretz Yisrael. That's how He describes it. And He says, physically, you do it by clapping your hands. Again, it's a symbol. I wouldn't say it's magical, but it's not so far from like a magical idea. Somebody I was learning with yesterday says, so do you clap? Reb Nachman, the first time he taught this, was because they weren't clapping during davening on Shabbos Parshas Nitzavim. So during Shabbos he taught this Torah. It's Torah Mem Daled, 50 Nun Daled, Mem Daled, 44 Torah, Likutei Moharan, and the people that I was learning this with, so they asked me, so do you clap your hands also when you daven? So I said, no, I'm a Lubavitcher. We don't clap our hands. This is, how do you do it then? She says, I think it. Why? Maybe it's better to also clap your hands. I said, no, I don't want to stick out. I don't want to stick out. In Chabad, the big deal is to be really. Why should I stick out? I don't have to look weird. It looks strange. There's no need for that. So I dress regular. Everything's regular. You don't have these long payas. You don't look weird. You look like a regular person. So, but it's good to understand what's behind it. Okay? And I think he gave the deepest explanation, and he also connects it to Avram. In the end, it's creating a new world. That this is like an act that brings out, clears out the air. It's an air freshener. So there was one thing that I wanted to mention that he mentions there, but he doesn't get into it, even though it was almost like on the tip of his tongue, but he never said it. That it says that the difference between Eretz Yisrael and the rest of the world is that anybody who lives in Eretz Yisrael, it's as if he has a God. That's the language. I'll say it in a second in Hebrew. And in English, and whoever lives in Chutz La'aretz, outside of Eretz Yisrael, he's as if he doesn't have a God. So that, if you translate it literally, and even if you understand it literally, it's very strange.
Rashi says that?
No, this is brought in the Gemara.
Oh.
Gemara brings this.
Because it's for intermediate, it's like, here it's direct from Hashem.
So he says it almost the same. He doesn't say it, but it's like following the gist of what he wanted to say. Maybe he said it and it wasn't written down. I don't know. But Rabbi Isaac of Homa learned it from the Alter Rebbe what the meaning of this phrase is. In Hebrew, it's Kol Adar be'Eretz Yisrael domeh kemi she'esh lo Eloka, v'Kol Adar b'chutz la'aretz domeh kemi she'en lo Eloka. So the word is dimion. So Rabbi Isaac said, the Alter Rebbe told me that the meaning here is that whoever lives in the land of Israel, his dimion yesh lo Eloka. His imagination has a God. But if you live in Chutz La'aretz, your imagination doesn't have a God. And again, it's not talking about it physically. It says, Machdar, wherever you are, you can make this Eretz Yisrael. What does that mean? To purge out the false needs, the false imagination. The things that you only imagine that you need, but you don't really need them. And they're caused by the boiling over of the waters, the blood inside the psyche that causes you to think you need all these things. Another way that you get rid of these feelings is you go shopping.
Mm-hmm.
It's another way, either the fridge or shopping or other ways that. So you build this system by which you never purge, rather you try to fill it up. But the truth is you can't fill it up because first of all they're imaginary, they're not really needed. You don't really need any of this stuff. You don't really need that food. But you never learn how to do the process of emunah, which is how to clean out everything. Because emunah is higher than will, right? Because it's the radla, it's the highest head of the crown. And will is only the third head of the crown. And so emunah always wins if you're able to exercise it, to use it. And what does it mean to exercise it? So that's what we'll see today some more about. Okay, how do you exercise your emunah? How do you use it? How do you actually bring it to the foreground and benefit from it, from that faculty that we all have?
Rabbi, at the very beginning you said that emunah is like purging all unproductive thoughts. Does that mean any thought that's not on Hashem? Like, what's an unproductive thought and a productive thought? Is there really any productive thoughts, or do you purge out all the thoughts?
All with that.
All of them, okay.
Except for, again, we said that as opposed to the East where you remain really with nothingness, we remain with feeling that Hashem is good. So that the sign that I've purged properly is that I have an overwhelming feeling of general goodness. I can't place it exactly. I don't know exactly why. But in general, everything is fine. Everything is good. And it will be good. I don't know how. I don't have a picture of how it's going to be good. I don't have a picture of how it is good right now. But if I've really purged, and Hashem is the substance of reality, and Hashem is good, so if I've purged all of myself out of my reality, I should remain with the general goodness of Hashem. In that sense, certainly, emunah is general. It's a general feeling. It's not a particular feeling. It's almost like a background sense of goodness. And you don't. It's not actually. It's not blessing. It could be the person's very ill and he still feels this. It could be the person's really suffering, but he still can feel the general goodness. So it's not coming from any particular state that I have or any particular condition that I have. It's coming from the fact that the world in general is all good. Okay. So this constitutes. So why did we skip here? Let me just see what it was originally. Okay. Any case. So I don't know why there's an empty line in 24. But really what it's saying is emunah is what's called in Breslov hitbodedut. So this line 25, this constitutes a sacred service of solitary meditation, or solitary discourse really, whereby the power of faith ingrained in the unknowable head, the highest head of the crown, is strengthened by allowing it to trickle down into one's consciousness, clearing it and purifying it. So we talked last time also about using smell as a symbol, as a metaphor, an allegory for everything that we're doing. So that we said that the first there is the need to nullify, remove, and then purify the air. And again, the whole idea here of air is that that's the empty space that we're creating. So the empty space, in the end, it's not only void of the foul smells that were there before, it also now has a general fragrance of goodness. That's the main thing. Okay. So this is what a person achieves during Hisbodedus. What does Hisbodedus do? It says there's only me and Hashem. In a certain level, it should also not be me. If I really do Hisbodedus, like the solitary discourse, so it should be not even a feeling of I and Hashem. It should be a feeling there's just Hashem, not even an I in any sense. But it's hard in the beginning. It's hard to lose yourself in this. So in the beginning, it's done like a discourse, like you speak to Hashem, and there's only Hashem. Why do I say that you have to purge your own sense of self from this? Because otherwise, it can deteriorate into that there's no one else apart from me. And this has a certain danger in it, that there's only I, there's no one else. But there's only me and Hashem, and only I am talking to Hashem. So I'll give you an example. In the modern Breslov books, it says that if you fight with your neighbor, what should you do? It says your fight isn't with your neighbor. Your problem is with Hashem. So go and talk to Hashem, and iron it out there. When you come back, you'll see that your neighbor wants to make up with you anyway. So what can I say? That's what it says. So there is a level where this is true. There is such a thing. But to say that that's all that's needed is to ignore the fact that once there is a world, when I come out of the state of Hitbodedus, of just being with Hashem, now there is a world, and we talked about this, just as much as I have a line, a kav, a mission that I'm bringing down, somebody else also has a mission that they're bringing down. So they might cross at some place, and they might argue about who does this place belong to. Does it belong to me or belong to you? So theoretically, it is true that if I go back to and I purge all my unnecessary needs, the ones that are not real, then it could be the next time I meet this person, I won't be affected anymore by those needs that I thought I had, and it will just disappear. The whole argument will disappear. It could be. But it also could be that it won't. That he sticks to his point of view. And as much as I've purged mine, he hasn't changed his mind. Everything is still the same. We're still arguing about the same, where the trash can should be, or whatever it is. So we're arguing about the spot, and you can't divide a spot in two. You can't both have the trash can there and not have it there at the same time. The physical world doesn't contain paradoxes. So we have to find some kind of other solution.
Maybe the motivation when you go, wherever I go to Hashem, it should be Ahavat Israel, not my own needs.
Said to purge really is not my needs. I'm not saying that it is. But now I came back. I finished my Yisbodedus, and now I'm back in the real world. And here in the real world, I still have an argument with my neighbor. The argument didn't go away. For all the Yisbodedus that I did, it hasn't gone away. It's still here. So I'm not saying that it's impossible that it will go away. Sometimes it does suddenly disappear and everything's fine and dandy, and it's like it never happened, because the issue was that I had some kind of imaginary need that really wasn't warranted, really didn't have any basis. But sometimes I come back into reality, and here in the reality, when I pull my kav down, my mission, it turns out that it still has that issue with my neighbor. It hasn't finished. We haven't been able to resolve it. So in that sense, Emunah has to go up to a state where I believe that however it works out, it's good. I have to reach that place where whether it's like this or like that, like we said, Avram said this, whether you give me a son or you don't give me a son, it's all the same to me. So it's not enough to just say it's me and you, like it's just me and you, because me and you still retains some reference point of myself as being the reference around which everything should somehow work out. But if I can purge my entire self from there and it's only Hashem, then there's much more chance that if the argument still exists when I come back into the world, when I begin to draw the line back down and create a world, and in that world it's still a conflict. So it'll be easier for me to say, Beseda, we'll do it your way. And I will still feel that this is how Hashem wants it. I won't feel that I've been cheated. I won't feel that something has been taken away from me. One of the most difficult stories in the Tanakh is Chana and Pnina. Chana at first didn't have children, Pnina had 7 children. And then Chana started giving birth, and with every child that she had, one of Pnina's children passed away. So what was this an exercise in? No, because nothing was lost. There were 7 children to begin with. There were 7 children at the end. But they moved from Pnina to Chana. So Pnina had to go through a very difficult process to understand. And what was most difficult about it for her was that she had constantly berated Chana
But for
because she
reason-
had no children. So it was very difficult for her to come now and say, you know what, I now understand that both our children, like they belong to both of us. And imagine that you did what Pnina did, and the other woman had children and didn't have children, and you scorned her for that, and you felt that you were more important because of that. And now all the children suddenly moved from you to her, and it's a zero-sum game. That's one of the, like in this world, that's what we said when we explained the Torah from the Baal Shem Tov about the talis that they're arguing about. And in this world, you can only get half. Yeah, I can't give you everything and you everything. In this world, the world doesn't contain paradoxes so easily. So it's either you or her. So since they were both Elkanah's wives, so it was like it's a zero. Same thing with the 4 wives of Yaakov. It was also a zero-sum game. There had to be 12 children, and if one had, then the other didn't have. So you had to get. But here it was doubly difficult because at the beginning, Pnina felt more important because she had all the children, and over time, suddenly all the children moved to Chana. So now she has to come and say, you know what? I do want to share.
Share what? The kids?
The kids, that they belong to both of us. In the beginning, I wasn't willing to share my own, but now I'm coming to you and saying, I can't be alone. So let's raise them together. Let's both be their mothers. So I don't know why Hashem wanted them to learn this, but basically we all learn that all the time. Okay, they also, everybody, it's like this understanding that when it comes to the physical world, there are places where the kavim, they intersect. There are places where the kav that each person brings down, the mission that each person brings down intersects. And then we have a question, who's going to do the mitzvah? Is it going to be me or going to be you? And so I have to learn how to want the mitzvah and not that this is what we talked about a lot. I have to learn to want the result and not my involvement necessarily or my credit. If somebody could turn the lights
Yeah, I
on.
was just thinking that.
The cloud went by.
Shkoch. But Chana's difficulty was the opposite. You might say that it was even worse. That she had been scorned, and now suddenly she has the mitzvah, let's call it. She has the satisfaction of this belongs to me. And now, not to hold a grudge. So she has to really purge everything to come and say that, yes, the children belong to both of us together.
Maybe easier because she already gave her first shvur to Hashem.
Maybe. That's why she was able to. Tina wasn't able to. I don't know if it was easier, but that's why she was able to do that. I wouldn't use it as something that built her ability, but rather demonstrated her ability. So if we go to there's another story just like that, and you might ask, where did Shlomo HaMelech know where to do the thing he did with the 2 women with the baby? And so he learned from the story from Elkanah. Says that the point of this whole wasn't even to say, okay, let's find out who the real mother is. Like, this is really how it needs to be. If you want to live in the spiritual world, we can cut them in half. But we don't live in the spiritual world. We live in the physical world. So in the physical world, who's willing to let go? Who's willing? And so the one who's willing to let go they're the one who should get, she's the one that should get it. Not as a proof of motherhood, even though in the end you understand that it's also a proof of motherhood. But it's a very interesting thing that the person to whom the mitzvah or the child or whatever it is really belongs to, first of all wants it to happen, wants the mitzvah to happen, much more than they want it to be registered to their name. They want the mitzvah to happen far more than they wish that the mitzvah be ascribed to them. They want the child to live far more than they want the child to be theirs. And to get to that level, you have to, in your emunah, when you're purging everything out, all the imaginary needs, like Avram, I need a son. If I don't have a son, I'm not going to be able to create a people for you. So it's an imaginary need, because you have a narrative in your head. And your narrative says this is how it's got to be. Hashem has other narratives. They can also happen. So, the person to whom the mitzvah really belongs to is the person who's willing to completely give it up. Because what he's interested in is the mitzvah, not in his relationship with it. He's interested in the mitzvah existing and happening. He's interested in the good deed being done. He's not interested in his name being given the credit for that good deed. And so you could say that the person who's willing to give up the most, he owns the most. He's not giving it up in the sense that he's saying, I don't care. It's not I don't care. I don't care is Eastern. That's like Eastern because there's nothing here. It doesn't matter at all. No, it's all good, and I want it to be good. And I really want there to be goodness here. Who does it? I don't care. But I want there to be goodness. I care that there be something good. I have ispilus, I have a lot of excitement over good things happening. But I don't need to have them related to me. I don't need to have them ascribed to my name. I don't have to be the owner of these good things. And this is the most difficult thing to give up, because you can say this is the root of people being jealous of one another. It's very interesting. The word kin'ah, in Hebrew you say kin'ah. Jealousy is kin'ah. Where does that come from? Kinyan. Jealousy means I want it to be mine. Meaning, it's not enough for me that the goodness be done. I want it to go to my name. If it doesn't go to my name, I'm not interested. And there's so much. In the real world, and most of the life is spent in the real world, not in emunah. So in the real world, there's this feeling that I have to achieve much more than somebody else. You say that, okay. Person should be driven. It's good to be driven. We'll do a lot more. On the other hand, if you don't have these moments of shov, of return, of emunah, of purging, then it becomes that I have to achieve it because otherwise it doesn't exist. And it becomes all about me because I'm the only one who can do this. So there's let's take an example that is very, I don't know if people suffer from it or not. You hear this song on the radio. You say, oh, what great music. And you're a little bit of a musician yourself. You say, I should have been the one to write that song. If you're not a musician, you don't care, right? You're just happy that somebody did. I don't care who the guy behind it is. If you're a little bit of a musician, you say, I could have maybe done that. But if you don't know it, like me, I don't know how to write a song any more than I know how to fly a plane. So it doesn't matter to me. This guy did it, that guy did it. But if it's something that I know a little bit about, so there I'm jealous. Why? Because I could have done it. But the truth is, there's no big difference. It just means that in those things that I know something about, I have a little bit of a kav also. And my kav my line, my mission, and somehow, I think at least, in my mind, that it somehow intersects with the other guy who wrote this, and really could have been mine. I could have gotten there first to that X marks the treasure spot, but he got it there before me. There's competition and jealousy and all this, and in the end, what's interesting is that the music was written. Yeah. Unless, and this is where you see it, how do you know if the music is holy or not? But the guy uses it, whoever, or the woman who wrote it, what do they use it for? Do they use it to say, oh, look at what Hashem brought into the world? Or do they use it to say, look at what I brought into the world, and I deserve all the credit? So, to hear music from a Menagen Rasha, from like Rav Nachman writes, from somebody who's wicked. It's not wicked. How could music be wicked? No, it's because it's got all these layers and layers of pointing back at me. Look at this. This is mine, and that you can't hear. Not because I can write music. I can't write music. But it's like it's so it's dripping with the person's self-aggrandizement, with his ego, and if you're sensitive to it, you hear it. But if you're sensitive to it, you can also hear it in your own things. When am I doing something without the expectation that I receive the reward for it, and I just want it to be out there? I wanted to affect the world. I wanted to. Because in the end, it all belongs to Hashem. It doesn't belong to me. So to reach that, Pnina had to do ridiculous amounts of emunah, to believe that in the end, these are the same 7 children, except they were 0 sum. It's either I have 7 and she has none, or I have 4 and she has 3. I have 3, she has 4. I have 0 and she has 7. And in the end, they all belong to her husband. It belongs to Elkanah. Really, it's his children. Okay, so I think that's a good.
But it's much harder.
What?
I think. No.
Well, what?
But it seems much harder to have children and then lose
Can,
them.
of course, but that's exactly what
One by
happens to
one.
people. Imagine somebody who had stardom at some point, and the younger people come along, and they take it from him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's no longer the star. He's no longer so important. He's no longer.
Yeah.
So he also has to learn how to say it. So it doesn't matter. It's like a big Rav who says, in the end, what's important is not that I become famous, but that the Torah becomes famous. So it says the 2 things a person is not jealous of: his student and his son. Why? Because they are considered just extensions of your same kav, of the same bitochon, the same line that you're bringing down into. You see them as an extension of yourself, your student and your son. But really, if you're really done emunah the way it should be, so it's not yours. The whole thing is really to give it back to Hashem. It's all Hashem's and it's all good. And whoever is zocha to bring it in, Baruch Hashem. It's all. The important thing is that it's here. Whatever this work is, the artwork or the Torah or whatever came out. So what time is it? We have plenty of time, right? Okay. So this constitutes a sacred service of solitary meditation, Itbodedut, whereby the power of faith ingrained in the unknowable head is strengthened by allowing it to trickle down into one's consciousness, clearing it and purifying it. Okay. This process is also alluded to in the idiom, first darkness, then light.
Let me just ask you, how does letting it trickle down strengthen?
I don't know if that's a good translation. I think what it originally said was that it's used, let me see the exact translation. in the Hebrew. You thinking? I don't have the Hebrew one.
What?
I don't have the Hebrew one.
Here's the Hebrew.
Oh, you have it? Oh, thank you.
Oops, I got another one of those envelopes.
No, it's in order that it come down. It's an incorrect translation.
So what should it say?
In order to come down, not by coming down, not by allowing it to trickle down, but in order.
Where
Meaning,
is this? What number?
you can understand the word by in two ways, I guess. But it's not clear enough. You should say, the power of the faith ingrained in the unknowable head is strengthened, and is allowed, or is strengthened in order to allow it to come down. Okay? So Emunah is to strengthen the unknowable head, and then it comes down, and it clears out everything. Okay? So there's another way that this is described. It's called first darkness, then light. And when Hashem created the world, first He created the darkness. Vayerev vayiboker. That's how nature needs to work. What is the darkness? So He says, faith acts like the sunset. The setting of all the light that filled the skies, and the skies represent the thoughts, the mind, that illuminated the fabric of our consciousness, are cleared by faith. So the mind is cleared by faith. The whole emotional being is cleared by faith. Everything is cleared out. And that's like the setting of the sun. Meaning that the sun in the sky, the sun represents a time to do. Okay? It's a time in which we want to extend ourselves. We want to have a kav. We want to have a mission. At night, you go back home, and even if you had a mission, you put it aside. You go to sleep. The whole idea of nighttime is to set aside time in the day to let the day rest. Let it go to sleep. Let it finish. Whatever was done was done. And I can purge my mind, I can clean my mind out.
So the best time to learn Torah is at night.
So
And it's
we'll
quiet.
talk about that. Okay. That Torah here represents, the Torah that's learned at night, represents Torah that's not with a direction of action. It's not trying to act on the world. At nighttime, there's very few mitzvot that you can do, in general. Mostly the only one you can do is Torah. And what else can you do at night?
No, it's not night. I mean,
What?
it's a midnight. Like,
Yeah, at night is not the time for mitzvot. There's everything stops.
You go to the bathroom and say the prayer.
But he say that.
Nachon. That's a yoytze doifen.
Yeah, but it's not really
I think about that one. Why it's dafka in the evening? It's very interesting. But in general, the mitzvot we don't do at night. We do all the mitzvot. The other example on the other side would be lulav. And with the lulav, you only take in the four species. You take them during the day. You can't take them during the night at all. Tefillin, most of the mitzvot that are practical mitzvot, we don't do at night. Even davening is not really at night, even though people daven at night. But the chatchila, it's supposed to be at sunset, the last prayer, and then that's it. They close the gates, you close the city, and everybody goes to sleep. So that's what it was meant for. So how would you think it should work? The first you do, and then you rest, right? Like Hashem, He did for 6 days, and then He rested. So you would think that the day would work the same way. First you have daytime, and the end of the day is the nighttime. And yet, the Torah says exactly the opposite. That the day starts with the evening, and it continues with the daytime in which you actually act. So what is...
Strengths, first.
So there's one way of saying it. The other way of saying it is that your impulse to do is not rectified enough until you clean yourself out. Meaning that the moment that you're created, from the very moment that you're created, let's say at this moment I was created, so my first impulse is not pure yet. My first impulse is to serve myself, is to be separate from Hashem. Again, these imaginary needs. So before I go and do anything, first of all I have to clean and purge everything out of the mind.
The neshama has to go and give a din v'cheshbon.
Even before it's done anything. Why? It's before the din v'cheshbon. It's just to clean out. Because the moment that I have any kind of life, I'm already trying to serve myself. So I have to do an act of emunah before I do anything at all. Emunah always precedes the action. There has to be some kind of purging in the beginning. So it's called Bereisha Chashucha V'Hadar Nehora. That don't try to do. I mean, also you see that whenever you get a good idea, what's the first thing that you want to do? Go do it. And there's people who open up their IKEA boxes and they don't want to wait. They don't want to think. They want to go do. There's people who even say, no, even to open it up is already an act. So they have to look at the box for a while.
The instructions, look at the instructions.
And then there's those people who say, oh, I can look at it in the catalog for 10 years also. I don't need it. It's an imaginary need. I don't really need this whole thing. That's how you get rid of it. You have to see, does it stand the test of whether this is a real need or not?
I like the
Maybe it's just
medicine.
The
You
medicine.
can take it.
Yeah, maybe it's an imaginary need. Maybe all I needed was just a feeling that I need medicine. Maybe that's all I need. Even to feel that I need medicine is very difficult for most people. Why? Because it says there's something wrong with me. If there's something wrong with me, I don't have to take the medicine to feel better. I already feel bad. That I have to take medicine, that I'm not perfect. It's very hard for people. All the more so if they have to do more than medicine and so on. So maybe it's enough just to feel that I'm not perfect. Maybe that's enough. So it could be that for some great people, it was enough. They just felt, the tikkun here was to know that I have to have more bittul. I have to be more accepting of the fact that I'm not perfect. And that itself is the healing.
You said you never went to a doctor, Reb Osher.
Yeah. Because why do I need to go to the doctor? I'm here. Hashem's here. What does He want from me? For me to be shafel, to be more lowly. That's all. To understand that I'm still very far from Him. By the way, that was the Baal Shem Tov and the Torah and Vayikra. The first aleph of Vayikra is a small aleph. The Baal Shem Tov said, I learned all the medicine that I needed. Why was it called the Baal Shem? Baal Shem was literally like a shaman. There's even those who say that Shem was actually just a shortening of the word shaman. Okay. He's a Baal Shem Tov. He's a Baal Shaman Tov.
מה זה שמן?
Shaman is the Goyish word for like a witch doctor. Somebody who does
Healing.
medicine in some way. So certainly there's no question that he gave a lot of medicine, but in the end, what was in his medicine? If he gave a kamea, if he gave a amulet, so all it said was inside, it had his name, Israel ben Sarah. Just his name. He didn't really think that you needed this stuff.
We would say today it's psychological.
Good. It's all psychological. It's not really psychological in the psychological sense. It's psychological in the sense that it's all about psychological faith. You have to have faith in Hashem. The more you have faith in Hashem, it'll all go away. So he says, I learned all the medicines that I needed from that aleph. What did he mean? So different Hasidim that came after him, they explained that every person who's sick, says in the Arizal, he's missing the 50th gate, because choleh, just somebody who's ill, is called a choleh, is equal to 49. So he's missing the 50th gate.
But nobody has
50th gate of not so
Hashem.
simple. Not so simple. It says, what is the 50th gate? The 50th gate is really the chokhmah within Bina. It's the feeling of nullification, because Bina is very yesh. It's very much a sense of being, of existing. So a person has to feel that he exists. He has to feel that he's here. We always say that. You can't throw the ego out. You just have to rectify it. But sometimes it becomes too strong, the ego, and it takes over. And then the person doesn't have room for any bittul before Hashem. And so he's missing the 50th gate. That's how it's described. So all you have to do is you have to find the 50th gate for that person. So he said all the refuot in the world, that's what they do. They give the person back his 50th gate. That's what they do, all of them. So I learned all the medicines I needed to learn about from the different interpretations of this aleph. What this aleph means. So I was thinking of an example of this. The famous story of some non-Jew who had a daughter who was paralyzed, and his wife kept bugging him to go see the Baal Shem Tov, even though he's a Jew and we don't go to Jews and whatever, but maybe he can help her. And she badgered him for a long time until finally he agreed. And he put his daughter on the wagon, and she was lying down because she was paralyzed in her legs. She couldn't stand up or sit. So she was lying down there. And they came to Mezhibush, and he walked into the Baal Shem Tov's house, and he opens the door, and he says, "Here." He puts on the table a sack full of money. "My wife says you know how to heal people. Heal my daughter." So the Baal Shem Tov looked at the pocket of money. He took it in his hand. He said, "I don't need your money." And he threw it out the window. And it spilled everywhere. So the non-Jew was very, very insulted. So he goes out. And he starts picking up the coins. So the Baal Shem Tov looks out the window and he says to the girl, "Why are you just lying there? Help your father." So she got up and she helped her father. And at first the father didn't get it. Like he didn't, because he wasn't expecting it. So what do you learn from this story? What was she lacking? The medicine she needed was kibud olim. Was to do, or maybe it's even just to respect an elder, because the Baal Shem Tov said that, or whatever. And it's a sense of nullification. It's very clear that this story is saying that when you nullify the way you should before somebody, suddenly the whole illness goes away, because it's all to bring you to a state of nullification. That's all it was for. So if you nullify enough, says the Baal Shem Tov, I learned all the medicines that I learned how to give, I learned from this small aleph. The small aleph represents Moshe Rabbeinu's nullification before Hashem. So, theoretically, when you apply this to therapy, so it would mean to look at what is the one place where the person's not willing to nullify. Where are they not willing to nullify? And sometimes it's very hard to tell them. Like you don't want to tell them, especially if you're close to them. That's why you can't be the therapist for somebody who's close, because you see it and you don't know how to say it
How do
right.
you nullify this need to eat all the time?
Purging. That's exactly the thing. You don't need it. If you need the food, that's one thing. If the body needs the food, it needs the food.
If you're hungry,
But if it's an imaginary need, it's what we call the boiling waters, and it wants to cook more food.
I hear you.
So you have to spend 5 minutes before dawn cleaning yourself. And if it comes back in the middle of the day, you do it again. And not to be afraid to take 5 minutes and say, I have to go do something. And you stop everything, and there's only Hashem. There's nothing. That's what we wanted to read today from chapter 33 in the Tanya. Okay, but we'll read it in a second. But faith acts like the sunset, he says, in the same way that the sunset purifies sunset. What does the sunset do? It takes the sun, which is all the different thoughts that we have. Again, the sun represents the day when we do, when we have all kinds of actions that we would like to perform. And there's a pasuk that says in the Torah, "Uba hashemesh v'tahiru," that the setting of the sun is called tahara. It's called purification. So it's a beautiful image. We started talking about this last week, that the sun sets inside the water. When it sets inside the water, it's like it's traveling in a mikveh, like it's going into the mikveh. That's also what a mikveh does, by the way. That's also why a mikveh is a way to gain the 50th gate also, because a person is nullifying himself in the waters, even though the waters, they represent bina. But when you tavel in them, tvilah is the letters of bittul. So taveling myself, immersing myself in the mikveh, immersing myself in the water, is the act of purification. So really, if I can't get over any of my cravings, so the next step is to go to the mikveh. If I can't purge it here, I go to the mikveh. And the mikveh, you can purge it.
That's what we learned, that nobody reaches the 50th gate.
That is the 50th gate.
No, that we can't get there.
Why?
Yeah?
It's like all the other gates.
Yeah?
So it doesn't. It's small. It doesn't have a name. When we get to it on Shavuos, for instance, we don't count it
No.
because we can't count it. But it's not because we don't get there. We do get there,
Uh-huh.
but you can't name it
Put it into
because it's
words.
bittul. It's exactly the point where it is and isn't at the same time.
So the 50 gauge of Bina.
Okay. The 50th gate of Bina is like where it meets Chokhmah, where it becomes one with Chokhmah, with the bittul.
Moshe Rabbeinu did get it.
Okay, and he got it a lot of times, and eventually he was buried in it. That's why you can't find his grave, as it were.
And what was the reason the Rebbe would always bring motzi, the
The yontav, but not during the day.
For motzi, it was always motzi.
My understanding is that he wanted to leave the day itself for actions. And then once it was over, when he felt that people had done everything they could have, because the day is given for action, then he would verbrengen. So the verbrengen should be like Emunah in the sense, giving it all back to Hashem. That everything that we did today, we did so many times, we did this, we did that. And all in the end, what does he do with everything that people ask for, everything that people want, right? When they write him a letter, they want something, or they're writing to tell him they did something. What does he do with it? Well, he rips it up and throws it on. Said it's over, forget it. No, keep going. Purge, keep purging all the time. Don't leave your life with don't let your life collect success. The moment you collect success, you don't have any strength to do anything anymore. That's a basic thing that we learned all the time. So faith acts like the sunset, the setting of all light that filled the skies. The thoughts that illuminated the fabric of our consciousness are cleared by faith. Only then can there be light, the light about which the Torah says, God said, let there be light. And that's already the kav, that's the bitachon that comes down. So now we're coming to this very important observation of in the beginning darkness and then light. That when Hashem created the world, that's how He created it. So how do we experience this? That when Hashem created the world, He first created darkness, then He created light. So we experience it through what the Medrash says, that before Hashem created this world, He created many others and He tossed them. Basically trashed them. So the question arises, why? What in the world did He do that for? To say, and the Medrash says that they didn't find favor in His eyes. Which is very hard to understand, because what do you mean they didn't find favor in His eyes? So He knew ahead of time they wouldn't find favor in His eyes. Just build the one that does find favor in His eyes. So the understanding is that to find favor in Hashem's eyes is not a yes or no proposition. Say it like this. It's not what you look like. It's not like if I like how somebody looks. to find favor in Hashem's eyes, I explain what I mean. When Hashem looks at a person's life, he doesn't see how he is now. He sees how he was, how he is, and how he will be. When I look at somebody, I only see how they are now. So either it finds favor in my eyes or it doesn't find. It's a static reality that I'm looking at. There's very few people in the world that I know so well that whenever I think of them, I see the whole process that they've been through. There's very few. Even myself, I don't remember everything that I've been through. I don't see it. But when Hashem looks at something, he's looking at the full lifespan, all at once. And to find favor in his eyes means that the process that I went through finds favor in his eyes. It's very important to understand the difference. So what did it mean that these worlds didn't find favor in his eyes? That when he looked at the whole process, he saw that they couldn't go through the process he was interested in. And that you can only see when you let the world work. Let it work. Let's see what happens. He knows ahead of time whether it's going to happen or not. But he has to let it work because, as we'll see in a moment, to really find favor in his eyes, it only comes through the actual experience. I'll explain this in a second. So the simple answer is, and then I'll say the more complex one, the simple answer is, he had to create these worlds because the world that would find favor in his eyes is a world that remembers that all the past worlds did not find favor in his eyes. To find favor in Hashem's eyes means to have in your memory, in your consciousness, that Hashem was willing to give up many, many worlds that did not find favor in his eyes. Can I create, it's a whole question, can I create in somebody's mind past memories, not of events, but let's call them what he understood from what happened in the past? Can I create the lessons in the person without actually taking him through the process?
Can't you read about it?
You might, but you have to read, okay? And then you have to think about it.
That's the experience.
So you're experiencing it at a shallow level, but what do you really understand? Okay, it's like they say, you can't write about something that you don't know about. You have to have experienced it yourself. To really get the moral of the story, you have to go through the story. You can't just read it. I can't even just read about it. I have to have actually been through it. And when I've actually gone through the whole process, then I understand what we're talking about. If somebody just plants the memories in my head, it'll be like I read a book. Not every book that I've read have I contemplated so deeply that I got the moral of the story right. Or even if I did get the right idea from it, it didn't affect me to change me. What changes us in the end, unfortunately, we would love it to be that we would be changed by books, but in practice, we change because of the life events that we go through. And so some people call it pain. It's just life. It's not something, you don't have to call it pain. It's just
And that's why we're the
life.
shards of those previously destroyed worlds.
So actually, in a certain sense, we went through that. Why? To give us the ultimate lesson. What's the ultimate lesson? In this case, it's not that they didn't find favor in his eyes. That wasn't the point. The point was that we learn, like Hashem, to be willing to get rid of the past. Be willing to get rid of, even if I invested all my time in it, and I invested myself in it, and it looks to me like it's mine, I'm willing to purge it. I'm willing to give it up. I don't want to take credit for it. I don't want it I don't want to collect my successes. You know.
So in therapy, if you have a person who said, I was abused,
Okay.
they should get rid of it, the memory, get rid of the memory.
Okay, that's the only thing that will work in the end.
they hold on to it.
Of course. It's very hard to get rid of it because it's giving you something.
Who says it's the only thing that'll work?
In the end, the only thing that will work is that you have to start anew every time. Even if it didn't find favor in your eyes, the past. You have to be willing to give it up. It's a very difficult thing to do.
Even if it didn't find favor, even if it did find favor.
Even if it did find it, all the more so. It becomes, again, it's not to say that you didn't suffer for it. Of course you suffered. But to use it now is already to use it like there's something to be taken from it, but not to keep saying, well, I can't do A, B, and C because I was abused.
But you have to replace it. If you take it away, you have to replace it with something.
With action. With the action
The
now.
present,
So this purging, it works in all directions. So here again, when it describes this, it doesn't really want to say that Hashem was upset about it because those worlds abused him or something. Even though they did. What kind of worlds were they? They were worlds that said, we're Hashem and you're not. Basically, that's what happened there. But it's like you have to go through the process in order to fully know how to take advantage of it. What's the advantage of Hashem created worlds and he destroyed them? That there is an ability to purge. That even though he created many worlds and they were dear to him at the time, but when they're no longer needed, he cast them out. He doesn't need them anymore. He doesn't want to hold on to them.
So even though that's the only thing that changes us, we still have to let go of it.
But because the purpose was to change me, was to create a world in which this was understood.
We saved the change and we
Okay,
let go of
right,
it.
right. We saved the lesson, and we let go of the events. So that's like to say that when Hashem looks at me, he doesn't look at my past or my present or my future. He's looking at all of it together. And when he's looking at all of it together, what he's looking at really is how have I evolved? How have I changed? That's what he's really looking at.
Can you
I
say
saw
that
a
if
beautiful
the
thing,
person- sorry.
I won't forget it. Saw a beautiful thing from Rabunim yesterday. I think it was from Rabunim, I'm almost sure. He said that the Aveira is not that a person does an Aveira. It's that he doesn't do tshuva right away. Hashem isn't upset at the fact that a person does an Aveira because there are many cravings and many things to do wrong in the world, and a person is only a person, and you can only do so much. But the fact that he does the Aveira, and then he doesn't do tshuva immediately, doesn't change immediately, learning from what he just did, says that's the real Aveira. But Hashem doesn't care about the fact that you did an Aveira. He cares about what did you learn from it? What did you get out of it? So he says he created all these worlds for us to learn that you have to learn how to purge. He destroyed these worlds. They don't exist anymore. They're nowhere. Except for in one place. In us. And in us, they're the ability to purge. That's what they give us. So you want to say, sorry.
Yeah.
No, about if a person sins, and from that sin, they change.
Uh-huh. So the sin was worth it. So he's not looking at the sin, at the Avera. He's not looking at it, here it is, because he sees past, present, and future together. So the value of the Avera is what came out of it. If a person did
Different
tshuva,
person.
it was worth it.
But when God decided not to destroy man again, did we just?
Oh, so what happened?
Yeah, we took it.
He understands. No, he's saying he understands how to do tshuva. What does tshuva mean?
Who understands?
Man. He's saying
Because
This-
man finally figured it out.
Okay.
So I will
the story in the Torah that all this is taken from is exactly what you just said. That up until the time of Noah, until the time of the flood, when the sins became too big, it was like, okay, let's purge the world. I'll purge the world. But after the flood, why does he say, I won't destroy the world anymore? Because man knows how to destroy it. Not to destroy it in the sense of destroy it. He knows how to purge the past, or he knows how to do tshuva. He's already figured it out. He's learned how to let go.
How did he decide that? What do we
He
do?
saw that the nature was different now.
Nature of
Of man. It changed. Where does he see it in man himself? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't have a
I'm
good
still
verse
looking.
that demonstrates it.
So what about?
But we
after
see from his promise that he won't destroy the world anymore, that it's like it's not needed anymore. We've learned the lesson. And the lesson is that if it gets too much, you do a mabul. That's what you do. You purge it all. You have to learn how to do it yourself, both for the good and for the bad. Meaning, for the good, don't hold on to your successes. For the bad, even all the more so. It wasn't mine to begin with.
After 120, we're supposed to give a din v'cheshbon, but that's something else. That's a
So they
different-
ask you, what's the beginning of the din v'cheshbon of a person?
The chatayik that he did.
No?
No.
So the first thing is nasata v'natata be'emunah.
Uh-huh.
First thing was, did you transact with honesty? Transactions are actions. They're not whether you did this. It's how you conduct yourself. What is your character like? How did you change? Did you change to learn to act the right way, and not necessarily which acts you did?
The transaction is not only business, it's
Everything.
All the transactions. Okay, so let's see now one more paragraph, and then we'll go to chapter 33 in the Tanya. This is the meaning of "and a tzaddik lives by his
we have
faith."
a lesson to do.
It is explained in the Tanya that this comes about by meditation and concentration upon the nullification of all beings before him. Total nullification. And that's called kula kamei kilo chashiv. Everything before him is like nothing. And that's the most important meditation that the Tanya gives for resuscitating the soul, for gaining back all our energy. That at times we feel overwhelmed. It's just too much. And so the way to rejuvenate, the way to rekindle, to refresh ourselves, and it's called Chiyas HaMeisim Mamash. It's really to bring ourselves back to life, is by meditating upon this concept of Kula Kamei Kulo Chashiv, that all before him is like nothing. Okay, so let's see it inside the Tanya.
All what before?
Everything before him is like nothing.
Before Hashem.
So it's 2 pages. And I'm afraid we're going to have to share, because I think I only made 9 of them.
Well, we'll make some more.
And the 2 pages.
Yeah.
All this,
The 2 pages that should go together.
I only got here one. Here, yeah.
So somehow, I'm missing one. Did somebody get to first pages? Yeah? No, it's my fault. Let me, okay. So here, take this, pass it over there. Okay, let's read this. This also will be the true joy of the soul. And joy means, simcha means that you can build, simcha is bina, so you can build real joy in the soul. How? When one recognizes at appropriate times that one needs to purify and illuminate one's soul with gladness of the heart. How do you do this? How do you fill the heart with gladness, with joy? It's not the joy of simcha, it's something else. It's called simchata nefesh. And really what he means to say is what we described as that when you go into faith, the feeling is that Hashem is all good. And they have no real reason. It's a background feeling. It's not something in particular. How does a person come to this state? let him then concentrate his mind and envisage in his intelligence and understanding the subject of Hashem's blessed true unity. That Hashem is one, that there's only Hashem. When we say Bodedut, like we said, it's just, there's only Hashem, there's nothing else here, even not me. How He permeates all worlds, both upper and lower, and even the fullness of the earth is His blessed glory. And how everything is of no reality, whatever in His presence. That's Kula Kamei Kula Chashiv. That there's nothing, when Hashem is present, really, His essence is present, there's nothing else here. And however, and He is one alone in the upper and lower realms, as He was one alone before the 6 days of creation. And in the 6 days of creation, already the kav that came down, the mission, the creation that came down. And also, even in the space wherein this world was created, and that's the empty space that we've been talking about. That in this empty space, there's only one thing that I experience, only one thing that I feel. Hashem's presence, that's all. And it's all good. The heavens and earth and all their host, He alone fills this space. And now also, this is so. He also fills it now, being one alone without any change whatsoever. For all things created are nullified beside Him in their very existence. There's nothing, there's nothing except for Him. That's the feeling of purging. That's the feeling of emunah. As are nullified the letters of speech and thought within their source and root, namely the essence and substance of the soul, which are its 10 faculties, Chokhmah, Bina, Dat, in the same way that when I want to do this psychologically in myself, I can think about the fact that whatever I said now really is nullified in my being. When I said it, it came out, and now, I don't know, it's even been recorded. But really, it doesn't have, in me, it doesn't have any reality except for how it is in my mind. And it's very important to understand this, that He's not saying that there's no reality. He's just saying there's no reality except for Hashem. Hashem is very real. He is the being.
So you're saying that this mashal also has psychological implications.
He's
so whatever we think and say can be nullified back into letters,
Right.
back into the soul.
Right.
Interesting.
This is like, if you've ever seen an implosion, that's sort of what I have in my mind when I think of these things. It's like that I've been expanding and expanding, sort of exploding. And there's a lot of hot air that comes out and fire and whatever else it is. And suddenly it all gets sucked back up into the source. And it was all there in the source. And when it came out, it seemed really real for a while. But now I have to bring it back into where it came from. Now, again, people have this thing that whatever you say you cannot take back. But that's simply not true. You can take it back. Can you take it back from the fact that nobody ever heard it? So the thing I mentioned from Russell before says that if you do isbodedus, you do there's only Hashem, you go back into the source, and there's only the source, so in a certain sense it does erase it from everybody else's memory. If you do it in yourself, it happens in reality. Does it always happen? Not always. But if you were like arguing about where the trash can is going to be, so that argument will somehow not be as severe the next time. It won't be as pronounced as it was the first time. Why? Because you brought it back in the source. I'm not taking it back, but I'm annulling it back in my source. It's like a feeling of, can a person feel that really he's a small thing, self-contained, and he's never done or said anything in the world. I've never really done anything. Can I go back to that feeling of primal feeling that I have never expressed myself in any way? And that's basically what it means that everything is nullified before Hashem. It's like Hashem has never expressed Himself. There was never a world. Okay? There is a world. He's not saying there isn't because there's Hashem. But He's saying, but look at it as if it's still in its source. give another example of this. I don't think we talked about this about Shabbos, but one of the big explanations in Chassidus is, what does it mean that Hashem rested on the seventh day? How can you understand this very strange language that the Torah uses? Because why does Hashem need rest? So rest in Hebrew, in English also, it means also to settle down. So think about a river like the Sambation that's gushing and rushing all week long, and then it settles down. So does it have more or less water when it settles down? It's the same water. It's just that before it was rushing and gushing, now it's settled. It's back in its source. It's calm. It looks like, and the ripples go back, they come down. So it says, when Hashem created during the 6 days, what did he do? He spoke. When you speak, at least from a human perspective, when you speak, it's as if you're releasing energy out. You're rushing and you're gushing. And all kinds of stuff is emanating out of you. When you rest, it's not just that you stop talking, but for real rest, everything that you said returns to its source. Where's its source? In your thoughts. So actually, how it's explained in Chassidus is that during the 6 days of creation, Hashem spoke. He expressed his thoughts. And then on Shabbos, he let all the words come back into the thought, and now it's only thought. And so that's why, really on Shabbos, there's almost an Isser not to talk at all. Right? And then in the Yerushalmi it says, "Bekoshi tiru ledaber b'Shabbat." That it was difficult for the sages. They very much wanted to make this the Av Melacha, the most important act,
Not to talk.
not
You're
to,
kidding.
because it's the
But we don't talk
it's the essential act, because that's how Hashem created the world. He talked. Obviously, he didn't talk. He doesn't have a mouth. But that's the mashal that the Torah uses. So, it's like saying, when they built the tabernacle, in the end we learned the 39 melachos from the Mishkan. So everything that they did was very nice. It was all action. It was the one thing that for some reason is not considered an action, but it's the biggest action that was ever done. What was the most important action in the Mishkan?
Pray.
Together.
Either Hashem telling Moshe, or Moshe telling the people how to actually build it. To make the plans legible, to make them heard, to make them, again, before they start building, Vayakel Moshe et kol adat bnei Yisrael. And he says, you can't build this if I don't explain it to you. I don't tell you.
Repeated so many times in the Torah.
Okay? Because that's the main thing. It's to tell you what to do. And it's like the Mishkan is like the Shemayim and Aretz. It's like the heavens and the earth. It's just creating something else. Before then, Hashem created the heavens and the earth with his speech. Now he creates the tabernacle. So there's an understanding that what he did there, he did here. How is this different than the rest of the Torah? Because this is all before the Hashem started speaking to Moshe, like in this week's parsha, like and Moshe. And from the moment that the Mishkan stands, there's a different level of prophecy. Anyway, it was just to say. So really, what happens on Shabbos, the speech returns to its source. And so that's called the elevation of the worlds. So that's Kabbalistic terminology for saying that the speech goes back into the thought that thought of it. And so you can make any amount of thinking in your head, hilulim. Hilulim is speech that's in the head. Like le'arher means to think, but it's one of those synonyms, which doesn't mean the same thing as thinking. Le'arher is to actually hear words in your head.
Not the same as thinking.
No, just to think could be that you see images. But to actually hear a voice in your head, that's called hilul. It says that the hilul goes up from the heart in the same way that speech goes up from the heart. But in speech it exits through the mouth, and in hilul it goes higher. It goes higher and higher. Hilul is like higher and higher until it reaches the mind. And so the mind hears the words, but no words are spoken out. So that's what it means that it's contained, meaning everything here continues to exist, but it goes back to its source. So it's not saying there's no reality. There is a reality. This is a level of nullification. This is not just nothing. This is what we mean by purging. We don't mean that there's nothing here. We just mean that all the separateness that we experienced is gone, and it all goes back to its source. Only Hashem here. There's no me thinking it. There's no me saying it. There's no me doing it. There's no you. There's none of us. Only Hashem. In the same way that in my mind I contain all the things that I ever did or acted or said or thought, they all emanated from my mind. They didn't come from somewhere else. Okay? There's no other place they could have come from. So to return it to its source is to say that my whole life in the end, and that's also how we have this picture of it today, that somehow you could take a person's consciousness and transfer it to another body. What would you need to do? You would need to somehow read the consciousness from the brain, from the mind. Nobody says you have to read it from the hand. Nobody says you have to read it from the lips. The image we have in our heads is somehow somebody will scan our mind and gather all the whatever it was that we ever said or did and transport it to another brain. And so consciousness will move from here to there. That's the picture that we have. Why? Because that's how we feel, that everything that we've ever done has emanated in the end from our brain, from our mind. And so what about all these things? They continue to exist where, if I can bring them back, and they're all in my mind, and they're not out here. They're no longer separate from me.
So they go back to Chokmah?
So it's even higher than Chokhmah. The Chokhmah is like the power that brings them back. Like everything. So he was alone. There was nothing to do yet. And when he began to speak, he began to emanate. He began to bring out an existence that seems to be separate from him. For all things created are nullified beside him in their very existence, as are nullified the letters of speech and thought within their source and root, namely the essence and substance of the soul, which are its 10 faculties, Chokhmah, Bina, Dat, and so on, wherein the elements of letters is not yet found prior to their embodiment in the garment of thought. He says even before thought, there's even something more before that. Even when I think, that's already some kind of extraction from the source. So take it back to the source, and the source contains everything, it's just not separate. And is explained elsewhere by means of an illustration from nature, namely the nullification of the sun's radiation and light at their source, the orb of the sun in the sky. So the old mashal for this, the old metaphor was that the sun's rays, they extend out of the sun, but they can only contain what was in the sun originally, and if we would bring them back to the sun, so everything would become, like, I don't know how to say it, but dark, I guess. There wouldn't be a reality of the sun's extension out, but it's just the sun extending, that's all it is. It's not like that I move this here, because this has a separate existence from me. The sun's rays have no separate existence from the sun. They don't exist without the sun. So,
From the body of the sun, they're nullified. You can't say in the body of the sun, here's the sun ray, so nullified to the
right,
sun.
you can't see it even.
Only in the space of the universe.
But that's only because it's an extension of the sun. It's not an actual separate object. Again, either you believe that Hashem created the world and then everything that's in the world is an extension of Him, or you say there's two things. There's Hashem and the world. The world is something, and Hashem acts upon the world. If you say Hashem acts upon the world, so the world will exist independently of Hashem. But if you say that all the world is an extension of His thought, of His speech, so you can also understand what it means that it's nullified within Him. Okay, what do we gain from this? Skipping a little. Exactly so, figuratively speaking, line 36 is the world and all that fills it, dissolved out of existence in relation to its source. So we said, what does purging mean? It means to feel the source. It means to feel the source more than the extension. It's to feel Hashem bringing the world into existence more than feeling the world. What are you going to focus on? That's the whole question. Again, it's like, what am I focusing on when I speak to you? If, notice something interesting, if I begin to think about what I'm saying, I'll find it very difficult to speak. And I do that from time to time. Everybody who speaks does that from time to time. Suddenly you have to work out your thoughts. Wait a minute, what's going on here? And then you suddenly you stop speaking. You can't speak at the same time, because if you're thinking about it in the source, you can't extract it, you can't extend it outside with your speech. So there's silence, and silence leads to focusing on the source. And when you focus on the source, suddenly everything comes back into it, and there's no separate existence. That's what he means here. When one will deeply contemplate this, his heart will be gladdened. That's the amazing thing, because what do you see when you bring it all back home into Hashem? That it's all good. You suddenly feel the background radiation of goodness that permeates all of existence, because Hashem is good. So really, it's all good. Why is it not? Why do I see that it's not good? Because I'm focusing on the extensions. I'm focusing on the separate words that were uttered and became a reality that, at least on the face of it, is separate from Hashem's goodness. And so then suddenly I see that there's things here that are not so good. But if I'm able to relate everything back to its source, and then kula kamei kolo chashiv, and look at it from the point of view of the source, where nothing of this exists independently, it's all just Hashem, then his heart will be gladdened and his soul will rejoice, even with joy and singing, with all heart and soul and might. And the intensity of this faith, which is tremendous, this is what's called faith.
We say that on Rosh Hashanah, you know, or Yom Kippur,
Then?
it's only Hashem, you know, that pasuk that you see.
Okay, so what time is it now?
20 to 2.
Uh-oh. You
No,
went
I gotta
over.
go. Okay.
We were so engrossed.
So we'll continue next time. And, bring this chapter 33, because we're not done. Because we want to learn an actual technique. So we started learning the technique, but there's more to it.